What if everything you thought you knew about the universe was just the surface, just the first layer of a much deeper reality you were never meant to fully see? What if dreams are memories, stars are alive, and death is not the end but a doorway to something more? Tonight, we'll unravel 20 of the most unsettling, beautiful, and mind-bending theories, philosophy, and ancient memory. So find a quiet place, breathe slowly, and as the world around you fades, tell us where in the world are you listening from tonight. You lie still beneath a quiet ceiling, while above you, far beyond the reach of cities, clouds, and satellites, the stars burn in silence, watching with light older than our species, older than language, older than memory. In the hush between those lights, a question begins to stir. What if we are not alone? Not in the dramatic way we've been told in films or whispered about in backrooms. Not with flashing lights, abductions, or metal saucers slipping through the clouds, but in a much quieter way. A way so subtle, so still, that we've never truly noticed it, because that's exactly what they intended. There is a theory known by scientists, philosophers, and late-night thinkers. It's called the zoo hypothesis. It suggests that if alien civilizations exist, and the math tells us they likely do, then maybe they already know we rehear. Maybe they've known for centuries, or millennia. But they stay quiet, hidden, watching, not because they fear us, not because they hate us, but because they've chosen to let us grow, the way we observe animals behind one-way glass. The way a biologist kneels at the edge of a field, watching a wild creature from a distance, never disturbing, never interfering, just letting it be. Earth, in this theory, becomes a kind of cosmic sanctuary, a preserve on the edge of a galactic civilization so old and wise it no longer needs to conquer or communicate. It simply watches, it listens, it waits. You can imagine them, silent ships far beyond Pluto's orbit, watching as our signals drift outward like the first cries of a newborn. You can imagine their data logs, filled with recordings of our languages, our wars, our poems, our music. Maybe they hear our transmissions and smile, not because we're impressive, but because we're still becoming. They wait for something we may not yet understand: maturity, unity, kindness. Or maybe they wait for nothing at all. Perhaps watching us is their way of remembering what it's like to be young. We point our telescopes at the sky, listening for something louder than ourselves. But what if the silence we hear is not a lack of response, but a carefully chosen stillness? What if their silence is respect? You wouldn't tap the glass of a snow globe and shout. You wouldn't barge into a wilderness and ask the animals to explain their customs. You'd let them be. You'd let them evolve. You'd let them rise. And perhaps that is what they are doing for us. Perhaps Earth is not abandoned. It's protected, not fenced in, not imprisoned, but watched from afar, delicately, patiently, the way you watch something fragile find its legs. And in those long hours between our sleeping and waking, when the skies are darkest and the world has gone quiet, maybe, just maybe, the watchers lean a little closer to hear our breathing, to watch our lights blink in rhythm across the surface of the globe, to wonder if, one day, we'll be ready to look up and see them not as gods or monsters, but neighbors. So sleep now, and let that thought settle in your chest like stardust. Maybe you are not alone. Maybe you've never been. And maybe, high above, in the hush between constellations, someone or something is watching kindly, waiting patiently for the moment you realize that the zoo has no bars, only stars. In the long silence of space, there are very few surprises. The stars burn as they always have. The comets follow their orbits with quiet, icy loyalty. The planets spin through the dark with no rush, no urgency, no voice. But one night, nearly 50 years ago, that silence cracked, just for a moment. It was 1977, a hot August night at Ohio State University, where a massive radio telescope, known as the Big Ear, stood quietly listening to the sky. Day after night, it scanned the heavens with patient precision, waiting for signals that might never come, recording the endless static of the cosmos, a song that rarely changes. And then something did change. For exactly 72 seconds, the telescope heard something strange, something loud, something clear. A signal so sharp and so intense, it seemed to rise out of the static like a voice through fog. It didn't last long, it didn't repeat, but it was there, and it was real. The astronomer on duty that night, Jerry Emmon, saw it in the data days later. A string of numbers and letters, 6EQUJ5, standing out like a flare on the page. He circled it in red pen and wrote just one word in the margin, a word that would become the name of the signal itself. Wow, that's what we've called it ever since, the wow signal, because no one has ever heard anything quite like it before or since. It came from the constellation Sagittarius, near the center of our galaxy, a place full of stars, black holes, ancient dust, and mystery. The signal wasn't random noise. It matched the exact frequency, minus 1,420 megahertz, that hydrogen atoms naturally emit. Hydrogen, the most abundant element in the universe, a frequency so universal that many scientists believe it would be the first one a civilization might use to say hello. But that hello never came again. The signal never repeated. No other telescope has ever heard it. It was a one-time whisper from deep space, a murmur through the void. And for decades, people have asked, was it real? Was it natural? Or was it a message? Because that's what makes this different. This wasn't a fuzzy sound or a strange pulse. It was strong, focused, intentional, like someone somewhere had aimed a beam of energy at Earth and spoken just once before vanishing into the dark. If it was a message, we never decoded it, but maybe we weren't meant to. Maybe it wasn't meant for Earth at all. Maybe it slipped through space like a note caught in a breeze, traveling light years just to land here by chance. Or maybe it was meant for us, but we missed the reply window. Maybe whoever sent it never heard back. Maybe they're still waiting, or maybe they're gone. Some say it was just a quirk, a reflection off a satellite, a moment of human interference, a cosmic coincidence. But no one has ever proven that. And after all these years, the wow signal remains one of the most compelling mysteries in the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. But maybe the mystery isn't the point. Maybe what matters is not what the signal was, but what it made us feel. For 72 seconds, the universe felt less empty. For 72 seconds, the silence broke, and we remembered how vast the sky really is. And in that remembering, we asked questions that echoed through every observatory, every science classroom, every curious mind lying awake at night under the stars. Are we alone? Are they listening? Have we already missed the answer? What if that one signal was the only one we'll ever get? What if we already heard from them and they've moved on? What if it wasn't the beginning of a conversation, but the end. Or maybe, just maybe, it was an invitation. A soft knock on the door of a house no one knew was occupied. A test to see if we'd notice, and we did. Not with shouts or sirens, but with wonder, with imagination, with hope. And in that hope, something opened. Not in the sky, but inside us, because maybe the wow signal wasn't just sound. Maybe it was permission to look up more often, to listen more closely, to believe, even when the evidence is faint and fleeting, that the universe is speaking, just in a language we haven't learned yet. So, sleep now. Let the silence hold you like distant light. Let the idea of one perfect signal drift through your thoughts like stardust. Maybe it meant nothing. Maybe it meant everything. And maybe one day, long after our own voices have joined the static, someone, somewhere, will hear us too and say, wow, the stones remember more than we do. They sit beneath temples, roads, and cities, worn smooth by centuries of rain and wind, watching the sky from the same angle for thousands of years. They don't speak in words, but in shadows and alignments, in symbols carved deep into the bones of the earth. And sometimes, when the light hits just right, they seem to whisper, what if they're trying to tell us something not about gods, not about myth, but about visitors? What if ancient civilizations were never truly alone? Across the planet, there are places built with a kind of precision that seems to defy the tools of their time. Massive stones cut so perfectly they fit together without mortar. Star maps carved into cave walls by people who had no telescopes. Structures aligned not just to the sun or the moon, but to entire constellations. We call them wonders. We visit them. We photograph them. We marvel at their mystery. But we don't always listen. What if these ancient monuments are more than graves or altars or calendars? What if they're messages, left not just for gods or kings, but for the sky, the pyramids of Giza, the Nazca lines in Peru, the temple complex at Göbekli Tepe, older than any known writing system? These places stretch back into a time before recorded memory. And yet they all share a common trait. They look up. They speak to the stars. Not metaphorically, literally. The Great Pyramid is aligned almost perfectly to true north. The Nazca lines, massive geoglyphs, best seen from above, stretch across the desert like a landing strip no one can explain. Stone circles in England and Africa track the solstices with more accuracy than many modern clocks. But the people who built them left behind no blueprints, no records, no manuals, only stone, only silence. So we wonder, what if they weren't alone? What if, long before satellites and science, someone or something noticed us, not from above, in the way movies show, not with ships and lights, but with presence, with observation, with influence so subtle it could be mistaken for inspiration? Ancient astronaut theorists believe these sights weren't just acts of human imagination. They were collaborations, that the gods described in ancient texts were never gods at all, but visitors, that the knowledge passed down wasn't invented, but shared, given, taught. The Dogon people of Mali, in West Africa, have star lore so detailed it describes Sirius B, a white dwarf star, invisible to the naked eye, centuries before modern astronomy could confirm it. Why? How? Were they simply gifted astronomers with sharpened oral traditions? Or did someone show them? The ancient Sumerians spoke of the Anunnaki, sky beings who came down and gave them laws, knowledge, language. Mesoamerican cultures built step pyramids that mirrored the heavens, not just the stars above, but specific constellations we now know take thousands of years to track properly without precise equipment. What if they had help? Not in the way that erases human achievement, but in a way that expands it. What if these were partnerships, quiet ones, short ones, like a brief handshake across galaxies? What if the visitors came not to rule, not to conquer, but to plant a seed and leave? And we, the children of that silence, are only now beginning to hear the echoes. Maybe they came in dreams, maybe in myths, maybe as flashes of light over mountains, as voices behind waterfalls, as drawings etched into stone when the stars were just close enough to feel. Or maybe we invented it all. Maybe the sky is simply big and we are simply afraid of being small, but the symbols keep showing up. The hands on cave walls, the spiral carvings that match the galaxy's shape, the figures with elongated heads and round eyes that appear in art long before Hollywood imagined them. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe we're remembering something we were never taught. Maybe the past isn't just behind us. Maybe it's looking down from above, watching the civilizations it once touched grow tall, go digital, aim telescopes back at the stars. Maybe we're on the edge of becoming the myth, the ones who send signals, the ones who visit, the ones who leave behind monuments made of steel and light. But long before that, the stone remembers. So sleep now. Let the temples drift into the dark. Let the pyramids dissolve into sand. Let the sky close gently over you, full of stars and the quiet weight of memory. You may never know what walked beside us in the early days, but perhaps that's not the point. Perhaps their silence was the message, a gift meant to unfold slowly, across generations, across lifetimes, across dreams. And maybe, just maybe, they'll return when we remember how to listen. There are nights when you close your eyes and find yourself walking through a place you've never seen before, a city you've never visited, a landscape too strange to be from Earth, a hallway that stretches into silence, lit by lights that pulse softly with no visible source, and yet, somehow, it all feels familiar, as if you've returned to a location you've forgotten, instead of discovering it for the first time. These dreams are different. They're not like the others that vanish on waking. They're rooted somewhere deeper, anchored in a feeling of memory rather than fantasy. And as you lie still in your bed, staring at the ceiling in the moments just after waking, you begin to ask yourself, what if that wasn't just a dream? What if what you saw was real, not in the way your current self understands real, but in a way your bones and your blood might remember, something older, something passed down, something buried not in your personal memory, but in the long corridor of your ancestral mind? Science has long tried to explain dreams through chemistry and cognition. Neurons misfiring, memories replaying, stress unraveling through symbolism. And yet there are dreams that do not fit neatly into these categories. Dreams that bring with them a sense of place and presence, too vivid to dismiss. A kind of awareness not created by your imagination, but reawakened from somewhere else entirely. Some believe that memory is not only a product of experience, but something that can be inherited. Not just habits and instincts, but actual images, actual places, actual emotional footprints, imprinted across generations through some yet discovered code embedded in DNA. Others take it further, wondering if certain dreams, especially those of worlds not found on any map, skies, with unfamiliar stars. Languages you've never learned but understand effortlessly are not echoes from the past, but from something even stranger: contact. Imagine for a moment that you are not just yourself, that within you are fragments of others, fragments of other lives, other stories, other minds, not from this world, perhaps, not even from this dimension. Imagine that long ago some encounter occurred, not with fanfare, not with lights in the sky, but quietly emerging, a crossing, a moment of understanding between species or beings. A brief moment of overlap in some ancient forest or frozen tundra, a passing of information not through sound but through presence. And what if something of them stayed with us, not in records or ruins, but in our biology, in our sleep, in our dreams? There have been stories passed down for centuries about people who dream of things they have no way of knowing, who speak in strange tongues while sleeping, who wake with the knowledge of places they couldn't have visited. Déjà vu, in this view, is not a glitch in the brain, but a ripple from something real. It's the mind catching up to a truth the body already knows. What if those strange, surreal landscapes in our dreams, the silver corridors, the endless spiral staircases, the soundless rooms lit by moons that do not orbit our Earth, are not inventions, but memories? Some researchers have studied the idea that consciousness might be non-local, that the brain does not create it, but receives it, like a radio tuned to the right frequency. If that's true, then dreams might be the static between stations, or the bleed-through from another signal, one that doesn't originate here. And if something or someone once broadcast to us, even briefly, perhaps in some forgotten age or through contact our waking minds could never comprehend, maybe dreams are the last place where that signal still echoes. You may have had dreams where you're not quite human, where your perspective is taller or smaller, where you move differently, think differently, feel time and sound and touch in ways that don't map onto your normal experience. These dreams often leave us unsettled, not because they're frightening, but because they feel oddly natural, as if we're slipping back into an old skin. What if those dreams are not just metaphorical? What if they are literal slips into inherited memory, not from our parents or their parents, but from another kind of ancestor, one not born on Earth, one not constrained by the limitations of carbon and oxygen and atmosphere? What if some fragment of them survived contact and became part of us? When you dream of walking through a place with no roads but know exactly where to go, when you see symbols you've never read but instinctively understand, when you feel the presence of others you cannot name but recognize, perhaps those dreams are not random, perhaps they are invitations, perhaps they are remnants, perhaps they are real. So let yourself drift, not away from reality, but deeper into it, into the parts of your mind that carry forgotten maps, into the spaces behind your thoughts, where memory is older than language, older than earth, older than the sky. Let yourself fall into the quiet possibility that maybe, just maybe, you are more than the sum of your experiences, that you are the result of something far older, far stranger, and far more beautiful than we've ever dared to believe. Maybe the place you saw in your dream is waiting for you still, and maybe you'll recognize it again. You look up at night and you see it, pale, silent, eternal. The moon has watched every one of us sleep, has cast its light on every generation that ever lived, has lit battlefields and lovers' faces, marked calendars and inspired legends. It feels familiar, even comforting. But beneath that comfort lies something strange. The moon is not like other moons. It is too big for a planet our size, too perfectly positioned, too precisely balanced. And the more we learn about it, the more impossible it begins to seem. It is the only large moon in our solar system to orbit so perfectly, so smoothly, with one face always hidden, never turning, always watching. That synchronous rotation means we only ever see one side, the so-called near side, while the far side remained unseen by human eyes until the age of spaceflight. Why? Why such perfect symmetry? Why such secrecy? The moon is exactly 400 times smaller than the sun, and 400 times closer to Earth, making solar eclipses fit with perfect elegance. That numerical coincidence is so precise, it has made some wonder whether it was a coincidence at all. When Apollo astronauts placed seismometers on the lunar surface and crashed spent modules to study moonquakes, something unexpected happened. The moon rang, not like a dull thud, not like soft earth. It resonated, for hours, as though it were hollow. That was not the expected result. A solid, rocky body should have absorbed the shock. But the moon responded like a bell, a shell that contains what? Some scientists dismissed it as surface echoing. Others pointed to internal layering, but the data remained unusual. The crust is strangely thin in some places. The composition is anomalous compared to Earth. And then there are the shallow craters, ones that should be deep if caused by impact, but stop abruptly, as if something beneath prevents further penetration. Metallic traces, hollow signatures, unexplained gravitational anomalies. Ancient cultures spoke of a time before the moon, of a sky that was once empty. Zulu legends refer to it as a creation brought by beings who arrived from the stars. Some say the moon was rolled into place. Others say it was brought hollow and set spinning, a perfect eye in the sky, to watch what happens below. The moon doesn't emit light, yet it shines with a glow that has stirred dreams and madness for generations. If you were to design a structure to observe a planet without interference, to watch silently for thousands of years, could you design anything better than this? Its distance stabilizes Earth's tilt. It protects us from asteroids. It moderates our tides. It affects sleep, biology, migration. Without it, Earth would be a wilder, harsher place, too unstable for long-term life. So what if it was placed here, not by chance or cosmic collision, but by intention? What if it's not a rock, but a relic? Not a natural object, but an artifact? We scan for signals across galaxies, but we rarely look at the object that looms largest in our night sky. What if we've been watched all along, not from afar, but from just beyond the atmosphere? What if inside the moon, behind those layers of rock and dust, something waits, not maliciously, not dangerously, just patiently, observing, learning, storing? And what if we've always known, in dreams, in myths, in the unease some feel when staring at it too long? What if that quiet hum behind your thoughts when you look up isn't imagination, but memory? A memory of something inside the moon, or a presence that has always been there, watching, not with curiosity, but with care. So rest now, under that ancient light. Let the moon's glow bathe your breath. Let your heart beat. Let the question settle in your mind without needing an answer. Maybe it's just a moon. Maybe it's more. Maybe it's both. But either way, it's watching. And maybe, just maybe, it's waiting for you to remember. We look to the stars with telescopes and hope, with mathematics and radio waves. waiting for a voice that may never come, scanning the skies for signs of a civilization. Some pattern in the noise that tells us we are not alone, but all we receive is silence. And in that silence, we find not just mystery, but fear. Because the question is not only why have we not found them, but what if they do not want to be found? The Fermi paradox asks the question that echoes through observatories and science fiction alike. Where is everybody? If the universe is vast and old, if the stars are many and the planets plentiful, if life arose here, then why have we heard nothing, seen nothing, found no trace of intelligent design beyond our own fragile Earth? And perhaps the answer is not that we are alone, but that they are hiding, watching, cloaked in technology so advanced we mistake it for nothing at all. What if intelligent life does not shout across the cosmos, but whispers, or chooses not to speak at all? What if the moment a species becomes intelligent enough to listen, it also becomes wise enough to be silent, to shield itself, to disappear behind layers of encrypted light and gravitational distortion? Our broadcasts spill outward from Earth in a thin shell, a bubble of noise, growing with every decade. But what if, beyond that bubble, the universe is full of civilizations who learned long ago that broadcasting your presence might be the most dangerous thing a species can do? What if the cosmos is like a dark forest, and every civilization is a hunter, silent and hidden, because to be found is to be destroyed? This is the dark forest theory, and it is not comfortable. It suggests that the silence is intentional, not empty, but full of fear. Imagine a universe where every intelligent species knows that somewhere out there, others may exist, and some of them might not be kind. If you knew that, would you reveal your location? Would you shine like a beacon in the night? Or would you cover yourself in shadow, erase your emissions, hide in plain sight? We search for signals, but perhaps they are buried beneath algorithms we cannot crack, hidden in quantum layers we do not yet understand, or encoded in wavelengths we do not think to observe. Maybe their messages are there, but we are too loud, too new, too primitive to hear them. And perhaps they are listening to us, watching as we stumble through our technology, noting our wars, our broadcasts, our attempts to map what we barely grasp, and deciding not to respond. Not out of cruelty, but caution. Not because we are unworthy, but because contact is not safe. Maybe they watch and wait, and perhaps they too wonder if they are alone, because the ones who came before them are also silent, also hidden, also gone. Or perhaps the civilizations that shout are gone for a reason. Maybe there was once a bright, loud species that cried out across the stars, and in doing so, drew the wrong attention. Perhaps what remains are the quiet ones, the careful ones, the watchers. Maybe our own silence will be our greatest protection. Or maybe it is already too late, and someone has heard us, and they are deciding whether or not to speak back. So sleep now, under a sky that feels empty, but is anything but. Sleep knowing that the silence may be filled with eyes, that the dark may not be as empty as we once believed. And remember that sometimes the most intelligent thing a voice can do is not speak at all. They hang in the sky like wounds in the fabric of reality, dark and silent and unyielding places where gravity swallows not only matter but light itself, where time slows and space folds inward, and we do not know what waits beyond that veil. We call them black holes, and we fear them, and yet we also watch them with fascination, because they are not just destructive, they are mysterious. And in their mystery lies a possibility too strange to ignore. What if black holes are not natural phenomena, but relics, portals, gateways, left behind by a civilization so advanced they no longer needed planets or ships or suns, only gravity and control? Our understanding of black holes is incomplete based on equations and observations. And when we peer into their edges, the event horizon, where light begins to lose its way, we are not just looking at a physical object, but at the edge of knowledge itself. Some theories suggest that the center of a black hole, the singularity, may not be a point of infinite density, but a door, a tunnel through space and time, a connection to somewhere else, not just another part of our universe, but another universe entirely, a multiverse, an escape, a way home. If a civilization reached a point of technological and mathematical mastery, would they need to build ships that cross stars? Or could they fold space, instead bending the cosmos like a piece of paper and punching a hole straight through? What if black holes are their footprints, not dangerous, but deliberate? What if the reason we do not see the builders is because they are no longer here, having passed through their own creations into places we cannot follow? We imagine them as accidents of collapse, the death of massive stars. But what if that collapse was intentional? What if, like ancient stone circles on Earth, these black holes are monuments and mechanisms, aligned not with solstices, but with timelines and intergalactic currents? What if they are not the end of things, but the beginning of something far more vast, far more intentional? Some black holes are strangely placed, oddly quiet, spinning at rates that seem calculated. Some are paired in perfect symmetry, orbiting one another, like dancers locked in slow, eternal rhythm. These are not patterns of chaos. These are patterns of design. And if we are right, then one day we may build our own and step through and discover what they left behind on the other side. So sleep now and picture not the black void of destruction, but the calm eye of a storm beyond time. Picture not an end, but a threshold. And remember that in the darkest places, the brightest possibilities often hide, waiting for those who dare to imagine a doorway instead of a grave. You wake up each morning inside the same body, move through your day within skin and bones. You call your own, and yet within that familiar shell is something ancient, something foreign, something shared with things that are not you. Scientists have discovered that more than half of the cells in your body are not human cells at all. They belong to bacteria, viruses, fungi, and microbes that live on your skin, in your mouth, and deep in your gut. They help digest your food, regulate your mood, support your immune system, and communicate with your brain. You are not one being. You are a colony, a biome, a collective. And the more we learn, the stranger it becomes. Some researchers believe that your microbiome acts like a second brain, capable of influencing your decisions, your preferences, your memories. You are not a single voice inside a skull. You are an orchestra of ancient life, most of it invisible, most of it older than your species. But what if it doesn't stop there? What if within you are remnants not just of this planet's history, but of something more distant, something seeded from far beyond the Earth? There is a theory called panspermia, the idea that life on Earth did not begin here, but was brought here, carried on comets or asteroids, drifting through the dark, across light years, until it landed and bloomed. If that is true, then the DNA inside you, the patterns that shape your skin and eyes and thoughts, may not be entirely terrestrial. It may be a message, It may be memory. It may be inheritance. There are sequences in human DNA that serve no known purpose, long stretches of code that do not build proteins, that do not seem to do anything, and yet they persist. Some call it junk. Others call it dark DNA. Some wonder if it is a lock waiting for a key, a structure waiting to be activated, a system left dormant until the right signal arrives. What if within you is an archive? What if your body is a vessel designed not just to survive, but to carry something, protect something, preserve something? We look to the stars for signs of life, but perhaps the signal is already inside us, too close to see, too familiar to question. What if alien intelligence does not come to Earth in ships, but has always been here, inside our cells, inside our genes, inside the things we mistake for human but are not? What if the reason we are curious, the reason we look up, the reason we dream of stars, is because something inside us remembers them? So sleep now, not as a single body, but as a constellation of life, a memory in motion, a structure built from the dust of distant planets. And remember, when you dream of other worlds, you may not be dreaming at all. You may be remembering. When we think of aliens, we imagine them crossing the cold void of space in ships that hum with light, arriving from distant stars to visit or observe or interfere. But what if they don't come from far away? What if they come from right here, just slightly out of reach, just beyond the edge of perception, not above us in the sky, but beside us in the folds of reality? Some physicists believe the universe has more than 3 dimensions of space. Some say there are 10, others say 11. If that is true, then most of reality is invisible to us. Our senses are tuned to a narrow slice of what exists, a tiny spectrum of color and sound and structure. We see only a fragment. We live in a sliver. But what if something else lives in the space next to ours? Not above, not below, but parallel. UFOs have been reported for centuries, not just in the sky, but appearing and disappearing without sound, without explanation, without heat or smoke or evidence of propulsion. They seem to blink in and out of our world, like shadows slipping through cracks. What if they are not from another planet, but from another layer of reality, another vibration, another pattern of existence that intersects with ours only briefly, only occasionally, like waves crossing on a pond? There are places on Earth where strange lights appear with no source, where time seems to stretch or ripple, where people vanish and return with stories they cannot explain. These are not always signs of madness. They may be signs of overlap. What if there are tears in the fabric of space-time, natural or created, that allow brief contact, brief visibility, brief moments where 2 dimensions touch and exchange a glance before parting again? We search for aliens using telescopes and satellites, but perhaps they do not live far away. Perhaps they are close. Perhaps they are watching from a room behind the wall, a room we cannot see, a space we cannot enter unless they let us. And when they do, what we see are not ships but translations, projections, forms made visible only through approximation. What if the UFO is not a vehicle, but a symbol, a shape created for us to recognize, a mask worn by something we could not comprehend in its true form? What if the flashing lights and hovering shapes are the simplest possible version of something far more complex, something that exists in a structure of reality our minds are not yet built to hold? So sleep now, and imagine the wall beside you is thinner than it seems. And that, on the other side, something intelligent and patient watches, waiting for the moment when the dimensions align again, and the doorway opens once more, not to another planet, but to another way of being. You move through time like it's a river, flowing from yesterday to today to tomorrow, believing it always moves forward, always in one direction. And yet, when you stop and truly listen to the rhythm of your life, you notice something strange, something inconsistent, something elastic. Because sometimes time moves too fast, and sometimes it crawls, and sometimes a single memory can make minutes feel like years. Time does not tick the way a clock suggests. It bends, it contracts, it expands, and that's just what we feel. Physics tells us it's even stranger. Time is not separate from space. It is woven into it. It is part of the same fabric, which means when you move through space, you also move through time. When you travel fast, time slows down. When you approach a massive object, time slows again. Einstein proved it. Satellites must account for it. And yet we still pretend time is simple, linear, dependable. But what if it's not? What if it's layered? What if it loops? What if it isn't a line, but a spiral or a web? There are moments you've experienced that felt more real than others, as if the veil of the ordinary thinned and you caught a glimpse of something deeper. A conversation that felt like déjà vu, a place that felt remembered but never visited. What if these are signs that time is not fixed, that moments bleed into each other, that the past and the future are not locked away but constantly brushing up against the now? Some scientists believe all time exists at once, that every moment that has ever happened and ever will happen is happening right now, just in a space we cannot perceive. What if the future is not ahead of you but beside you? What if the past is not behind you but within you? When people speak of precognition or intuition or strange dreams that later come true, they are often dismissed. And yet, what if those glimpses are not imagination but reception? What if time is like light, and sometimes it bends around corners, sometimes it reflects, sometimes it fractures, and when it does, maybe we see fragments of what has not yet happened, or perhaps what already has? What if time travel does not require machines, but awareness? What if memory itself is a form of travel, a way of reliving and reshaping the past? What if dreams are projections, not backward but forward, or sideways, across dimensions we do not yet measure? What if you have already lived this moment and are simply remembering it again? So sleep now and forget the ticking of clocks. Let go of the calendar. Let go of the timeline. Drift into a space where all moments overlap, where you are both child and elder, both beginning and ending, both dreaming and waking, all at once. Time is not a cage, it is a mirror. And sometimes, if you look closely, it reflects what has not yet come. We understand gravity as a force, the invisible pull that keeps your feet on the ground, the planets in orbit, the stars in clusters. It is everywhere, and yet we barely understand it. It is the weakest of the fundamental forces, and yet it shapes galaxies. It is constant, and yet its true nature remains one of the greatest mysteries in science. We can describe how gravity behaves, but not exactly why. We can predict its effects, but we cannot explain its origin. What if gravity is not just a physical interaction, but a communication? Some physicists have suggested that gravity may leak into our universe from another dimension, that what we feel as a pull is actually a distortion, a message broadcast across the layers of reality. In string theory and quantum gravity models, gravity behaves strangely, as if it is responding to something unseen. What if gravity is not just the bending of space-time, but the echo of a design? What if every object that moves under its influence is not just obeying physics, but following instructions written long ago? There are patterns in gravity, not just orbits and tides, but harmonics, waves. Gravity behaves in ways that mirror sound, vibration, pulse. What if those pulses are information? What if gravity waves carry more than momentum? What if they carry memory? What if they are the fingerprints of events that happened before time as we know it began? When two black holes collide, they send out gravitational waves that stretch the fabric of the cosmos. We have only recently learned how to detect these waves. We cannot hear them with ears, but the universe does. What if they are not just noise? What if they are recordings, messages, not written in words, but in frequency and curve and rhythm? Ancient cultures spoke of the music of the spheres, the idea that the movement of planets and stars creates a symphony too vast for us to hear. What if they were right? What if gravity is the medium of that music, and space itself is the across the surface of this planet or something day feeling it? What if the reason gravity feels mysterious is because it was never meant to be fully understood, as only noticed, foundation, only followed, environment, like a trail? But what if it is more than that? So what if the now earth and is not just of your body, upon which your life but as connections? But feel the pull of the earth, a witness, not just a recorder of everything that has ever happened. Let gravity and every thought you like that has ever passed through a human mind, soft and ancient old tradition stars speak of and the remember earth as a living that holds you here. A mother may be more force than a force that feels. It may be a message and breathes. What if that metaphor is closer to the truth than we realize? What if the electromagnetic fields that wrap around the earth do more than shield us from solar radiation? What if they interact with consciousness, not passively but actively, absorbing the energetic imprints of our feelings, memories, ideas? When you walk into an old building and feel something heavy, something strange, you call it atmosphere, or memory, or presence. But what if that sensation is the residue of thought, clinging to the molecules of stone and wood and soil? What if every thought leaves a mark? Some researchers have explored the idea that consciousness may be local, that it can imprint itself onto the environment, like sound pressed into vinyl. What if the planet itself is a giant recording device, capturing not just actions, but awareness, and storing them in layers, like sediment, like fossils of the mind? There are forests that seem to hum with memory, mountains that seem to hold secrets. What if the reason is that they do? Indigenous cultures around the world have long described the land as something that remembers, as something that can be harmed, not just physically, but emotionally. What if they were not speaking in metaphor, but in science we do not yet understand? What if the reason some places feel sacred is because they are dense with thought, saturated with generations of emotion and story and attention? What if the earth itself is conscious, and what we call nature is not just alive, but aware? When lightning strikes or tectonic plates shift, energy is released. But what if other kinds of energy also move through the ground, your fear, your joy, your wonder, passing into the earth like signals, like seeds? What if the earth grows not just trees and rivers, but memory? And what if, when you sleep, it speaks back, whispering in dreams the things it has heard, the stories it has held for eons? So sleep now and feel the ground beneath you not as soil, but as spirit. Let yourself sink into the idea that nothing is lost, that every laugh, every cry, every silent wish has been received, remembered, recorded, and know that the earth is not still. It is listening. You walk across the surface of this planet every day, feeling it beneath your feet, sturdy and silent, a sphere of rock and water that you've come to see as background, foundation, environment. But what if it is more than that? What if the earth is not just a stage upon which your life unfolds, but a participant, a witness, a recorder of everything that has ever happened and every thought that has ever passed through a human mind? Ancient traditions speak of the earth as a living being, a mother, a force that feels and listens and breathes. What if that metaphor is closer to the truth than we realize? What if the electromagnetic fields that wrap around the earth do more than shield us from solar radiation? What if they interact with consciousness, not passively but actively, absorbing the energetic imprints of our feelings, memories, ideas? When you walk into an old building and feel something heavy, something strange, you call it atmosphere, or memory, or presence. But what if that sensation is the residue of thought, clinging to the molecules of stone and wood and soil? What if every thought leaves a mark? Some researchers have explored the idea that consciousness may be not local, that it can imprint itself onto the environment, like sound pressed into vinyl. What if the planet itself is a giant recording device, capturing not just actions but awareness, and storing them in layers, like sediment, like fossils of the mind? There are forests that seem to hum with memory, mountains that seem to hold secrets. What if the reason is that they do? Indigenous cultures around the world have long described the land as something that remembers, as something that can be harmed, not just physically, but emotionally. What if they were not speaking in metaphor, but in science we do not yet understand? What if the reason some places feel sacred is because they are dense with thought, saturated with generations of emotion and story and attention? What if the earth itself is conscious, and what we call nature is not just alive, but aware? When lightning strikes or tectonic plates shift, energy is released. But what if other kinds of energy also move through the ground? Your fear, your joy, your wonder, passing into the earth like signals, like seeds. What if the earth grows not just trees and rivers, but memory? And what if, when you sleep, it speaks back, whispering in dreams the things it has heard, the stories it has held for eons? So sleep now, and feel the ground beneath you, not as soil, but as spirit. Let yourself sink into the idea that nothing is lost, that every laugh, every cry, every silent wish has been received, remembered, recorded, and know that the earth is not still. It is listening. You speak without thinking, form words without effort, turn thoughts into sound so easily that you forget how miraculous it really is. Language is the invisible thread that binds us together, that transforms individual minds into collective understanding. It is taught, but it also feels instinctive, as if it is not learned from scratch, but remembered. Children grasp it with astonishing speed. It unfolds from them like something planted, not built. And for centuries, people have wondered, where did language come from? Not the specific words or grammar, but the capacity itself. What if it was not developed, but delivered? Many ancient cultures tell stories of gods or beings from the sky who gifted humanity with speech. They describe a time before language, a time of silence or confusion until something changed. In the Sumerian texts, language was associated with divine instruction. In biblical accounts, the sudden fragmentation of language at Babel suggests it was once unified, once whole, once imposed. What if that story is not about punishment, but about control? What if the ability to speak was not a natural step in evolution, but a key turned by an unseen hand? Your brain has areas specifically devoted to language, regions that activate with reading, listening, speaking, imagining. These areas are complex and interconnected, and no other species shares this structure. Some animals communicate, yes, but none possess language in the way humans do. What if that neurological structure is not organic, but engineered? What if the language centers in your brain were added, not evolved? What if language is a kind of software uploaded into biology long ago? And why give language at all? Perhaps to enable cooperation, perhaps to allow progress, or perhaps to serve as a kind of boundary. Because language does not just express thought, it shapes it. The words you have determine what you can imagine. If a concept has no word, it becomes hard to hold. So what if language was a tool not only to communicate, but to confine? Linguists speak of linguistic relativity, the idea that the structure of your language shapes your perception. What if that's not a side effect, but the point? What if the language you were given was a way to keep your mind within a fence, to steer your thoughts, to limit your perception to what can be described? And what if, buried inside your grammar and vocabulary, are hints of another voice, another origin? Some believe that ancient or sacred languages hold power, not symbolically, but actually, that certain sounds align with frequencies in the body and the universe. That chants and mantras resonate not because of belief, but because of design. What if those sounds are leftovers from the original language, the one that came from the stars, from the builders, from the watchers? So sleep now and listen to the words in your mind, not as noise, but as echoes. Let them unfold slowly, like petals in reverse. Let them guide you back to the silence beneath speech, the place before vocabulary, the space where language was not invented, but given. You look at the night sky and you see points of light, scattered and steady, cold and beautiful. You call them stars, suns of distant systems, nuclear furnaces, burning hydrogen into helium across unimaginable distances. You understand their life cycle, their size, their gravity, their light. But what if you do not understand their mind? What if stars are not only burning, but thinking? It sounds impossible. How could a ball of plasma be conscious? But consider this: your own brain is not solid. It is made of fluid and electricity, particles dancing in patterns. It is not the substance, but the structure that creates awareness. So what if stars, too, have structure, magnetic fields, plasma flows, rhythms that serve as a kind of neural network on a scale too vast for us to comprehend? Some scientists have speculated that stars may be capable of long-term memory, that their oscillations and vibrations contain patterns that persist, that evolve. What if those patterns are not random? What if they are thoughts, just slower, just deeper, just older? And if stars think, do they dream? Do they communicate? Do they sing to each other in pulses of light and radiation? Ancient myths often described Stars as gods, as beings who watched from above, who intervened in mortal affairs. What if they were right in essence, if not in detail? What if stars are not simply background objects, but participants in the cosmic drama? Imagine a civilization of stars, each one vast and luminous, each one aware of its own place in the web of galaxies. Imagine their lifespans not as ages of fire, but as epochs of thought. Imagine that supernovae are not deaths, but transformations, explosions of insight. Imagine that black holes are their libraries, places where their knowledge is folded inward, compressed into singularities of meaning. What if the universe is not empty and dead, but awake and ancient and full of intelligence we cannot yet recognize? What if we have been looking for signs of life in the wrong places, on rocky worlds and watery moons, while the real minds burn in the sky, slow and silent and watching? So sleep now, and let the starlight enter your mind, not as photons, but as questions. Let yourself be held by their gaze, not of judgment, but of wonder. And remember that when you stare into the sky, you may not be looking at distant fire, but distant thought, and those lights may be looking back. You stand on the shore, watching the waves rise and fall, hearing their rhythm, feeling their pull, never questioning the depth behind that movement, never knowing what watches from beneath. The ocean covers more than 70% of the earth, and yet we have explored less than 5% of it. More people have walked on the moon than have reached the deepest trenches of the sea. We build machines to look outward to distant galaxies, but barely peer into the black beneath our own waves. What if that is a mistake? What if the ocean is not only deep in water, but in intelligence? What if we are not the first species to rise on Earth with thought and speech and culture, but only the first on land? Across centuries, sailors and mystics have spoken of lights beneath the water, sounds that cannot be traced, creatures that defy classification. Modern sonar detects clicks, hums, pulses that come from no known animal. There are songs in the deep that no whale has ever claimed. There are areas of the ocean floor where equipment malfunctions, where compasses spin wildly, where submarines lose contact without reason. What if these are not anomalies, but signals? Some theories suggest that a civilization might develop not on dry land, but in the depths. That if life emerged in the oceans, as biology tells us it did, then there may have been branches that never needed to leave, that evolved intelligence beneath pressure and darkness and silence, where sonar is language and light is rare, if such. A species developed tools, culture, even consciousness we might never know. Their world would not overlap with ours. We would call their signs myths. We would call their cities trenches. We would hear their voices as noise. Perhaps they are not human-shaped. Perhaps they are not even carbon-based. But if they are old, they would be wise. If they are quiet, they might be hiding. Perhaps from us, perhaps from something else. And perhaps our own myths remember them serpents, sirens, leviathans, not because of fiction, but because of distant, inherited truth. Imagine an oceanic intelligence not bound by speech, but by vibration, not reliant on fire, but on chemistry, not limited to one body, but distributed like coral, like fungus, across the reefs and ridges of the sea floor. Imagine that what we mistake for nature is actually architecture, that the patterns of the currents, the shapes of the atolls, the behaviors of tides, are all part of a vast design. We search for extraterrestrials with telescopes, but ignore the alien darkness beneath us. What if the truth is not above, but below? What if Earth is already shared? What if we are not alone, not in the galaxy, but not even on this planet? So sleep now, and hear the hum of waves, not as background, but as voice. Let the darkness of the ocean rise behind your eyelids, deep and endless and ancient. And remember, as you drift, that intelligence may not always announce itself. Sometimes it waits in silence. Sometimes it listens. And sometimes it lives in the cold black beneath the tide. You are told your thoughts live behind your forehead, housed in a lump of gray matter, suspended in fluid, protected by bone. You are taught that consciousness is a product of neurons firing, that your sense of self is the byproduct of biology and chemistry and chance. But what if that is not true? What if the mind is not a machine, but a signal? What if the brain is not the source of thought, but the receiver? There are people who lose parts of their brain to injury or surgery and retain their memories. There are cases where function is preserved despite enormous trauma. Some individuals are born with only half a brain and yet live full lives. This challenges the idea that consciousness is confined to a single organ. What if it is not confined at all? Think of radio. The music is not inside the box. The box only decodes the signal. The music comes from elsewhere. So what if your thoughts come not from inside your skull, but from a field that surrounds you? A field that stretches beyond the body, beyond the room, beyond what we can measure. Some call this the morphic field, or the Akashic record. Others call it soul. But whatever name you give it, the idea is the same. Consciousness is not local. It is everywhere. And the brain, like a lens, brings a piece of it into focus. What you call thinking is actually tuning. If this is true, then your dreams are more than memory. They are exploration. Your intuition is not guesswork. It is signal. Your moments of insight, your synchronicities, your sudden ideas are not random. They are messages received from a wider mind, a collective field. And what if this field is not only human? What if animals, plants, even stones and stars all tune into it? What if every thought, every emotion, every breath becomes part of that field? Then nothing is lost. Then no life is wasted. Then even silence is full. So sleep now and let your thoughts drift not inward but outward. Feel your mind expand beyond your body, into the space around you, into the room, the air, the trees, the sky. And know that your thoughts do not end with you. They ripple, they echo, they continue. You feel them before you understand them. Emotions arrive not as words, but as waves, flooding your chest, speeding your pulse, warming or chilling your skin. And yet you are taught that they are separate from truth, from reason, from science, that they are chemical illusions rather than meaningful signals. But what if that's not true? What if emotions are not a byproduct of biology, but the primary way the universe communicates with you? What if they are not internal reactions, but external transmissions, tuned to your deepest self? Consider how your emotions often arrive in moments that defy logic. When you enter a room and feel uneasy without reason. When you look into a stranger's eyes and feel something ancient and familiar. When you stand before a mountain or a thunderstorm and feel awe so strong it silences your mind. Where does that come from? Why do emotions reach so far beyond our evolutionary needs? What if they are not responses, but signals? There is a theory among mystics and philosophers that the universe is built not from matter, but from vibration, that all things are frequency. And if that is true, then emotion is the bridge between frequency and perception. You do not feel ideas, you feel energies. When someone speaks from the heart, you know it. When the truth is spoken, it rings in the body. What if that ringing is the language of the universe? Emotions do not obey time. A smell can make you cry. A song can return you to a moment 20 years old. A dream can leave you mourning someone you've never met. What if that power exists because emotion connects you to the timeless, to the fundamental, to the source? Think of how animals feel fear before danger. Think of how people can sense when they're being watched. Think of how a mother knows when her child is hurt across miles. These are not coincidences. They are transmissions, and emotions are the receivers. Emotions are not fragile. They are ancient. They are the code beneath logic, the whisper beneath noise. And what if this emotional current flows not just through you, but through space itself? What if planets and stars and the vacuum between them pulse with emotional data and what we call gravitational fields or magnetic force is only part of the picture? What if civilizations once spoke with no words at all, only resonance? What if they still do? So sleep now and listen to the quiet inside your chest. Feel not just your heartbeat, but the space it moves through. Trust your sadness. Trust your joy. Trust your wonder. They are not weaknesses. They are messages. And somewhere, in the silence, the universe is speaking back. You are told that your thoughts are shaped by the world, that you react to what is already there, that your mind is a mirror, not a maker. But what if this is backwards? What if the world you see, the life you live, the body you inhabit, are all shadows cast by something deeper? What if consciousness is not the product of the universe, but the origin of it? Modern physics tells us that particles exist in multiple states until observed, that time is not constant, that space bends, that nothing is truly solid. At the quantum level, reality behaves more like a thought than a thing, and the only constant in all of it is the observer. You are not watching reality. You are participating in it, shaping it, influencing it. Some scientists now wonder if consciousness is not inside the universe, but the container of it. What if the Big Bang was not an explosion, but a decision, a moment of awareness that rippled outward in the form of time and space and matter? There are traditions that speak of this. Ancient mystics who said the world is dreamt into being, that matter is crystallized thought, that spirit precedes flesh, that everything you touch is part of a shared imagination, so complete it appears separate, but deep down it is all one, and it begins with mind. This does not mean the world is not real. It means reality is more than physical. It means your attention has power. Your intention has consequence. Your belief is not illusion. It is blueprint. You expect pain, it finds you. When you expect joy, you uncover it. When you focus on gratitude, beauty multiplies. You are not imagining these changes. You are creating them. You are steering the flow of events, not by force, but by focus. This is not magic. This is the forgotten science of consciousness. So what does it mean if your thoughts create? It means you are not a victim of circumstance. It means you are not trapped in fate. It means your dreams matter. Your imagination is not fiction. It is architecture. The more vividly you dream, the more possible the world becomes. So sleep now, and let your mind expand beyond your body, beyond your bed, beyond your memories. Visualize not just your own life, but the world you long to see. Know that by imagining it, you begin to build it. And maybe, just maybe, this is why you are here too. Remember that everything begins in mind. And so does everything else. You are born into a body you did not choose, in a world already turning, with a mind that becomes aware of itself slowly, piece by piece. You learn to speak, to walk, to remember, and eventually to question. And sooner or later, the question arrives that no one escapes. What happens when this is over? What happens when the light fades from the eyes, when the breath slows and stops, when the body returns to the dust from which it came? You are told different things depending on where. And when you are born, that there is heaven, that there is nothing, that there is reincarnation, that there is sleep. But what if death is none of these? What if death is not the end, not a void, not a punishment, not even a release, but something else entirely? What if death is a transition, not from life to nothing, but from one layer of reality to another? Modern science understands the body. It can measure the brain, monitor the heartbeat, document the decay of cells. But it cannot find the self. It cannot locate consciousness. It cannot point to a single spot in the brain and say, "Here you are." It can describe how you speak, how you react, how you dream, but it cannot explain the presence behind your eyes, the spark that watches, the awareness that lingers when thoughts are still. That awareness is not mass. It is not energy in the way we understand. It cannot be weighed or scanned or predicted. And yet it is the most fundamental part of your existence. What if it is not bound to your body? What if it only uses your body as a temporary home? There are countless accounts of people who have died for moments and returned. Some describe tunnels of light. Some describe voices without mouths. Some describe peace so vast that they forget who they were. Some remember details from rooms they were not in, conversations they should not have heard. These are not fantasies. They are data points. Across cultures, across time, these stories persist. They echo. And beyond those stories are deeper clues, in dreams, in visions, in the strange sense that some places feel familiar, though you have never been, in the way we often feel watched, even when we are alone, in the way a loved one's presence lingers long after they are gone. What if these feelings are not illusions, but signals? What if consciousness does not vanish, but shifts? Physicists tell us there may be more than 4 dimensions, that reality may be stacked, layered, interwoven with itself in ways we cannot yet see. What if death is the moment your awareness moves through a fold in space-time into a place that cannot be reached with feet or measured with tools? What if your soul is not destroyed, but translated? What if death is a doorway, not a disappearance? And what if you've done this before? What if this life is not your first and not your last, but simply the current chapter in a story far too vast to be told all at once? What if your forgetfulness is not failure, but part of the process, of what makes each experience meaningful, unique, vivid. What if birth is a narrowing of perception, and death a widening, a return to your full self? The universe recycles everything. Water, atoms, stars, nothing is wasted. Everything transforms. Why would consciousness be the only exception? Why would your deepest self be the one thing that ends in finality? What if death is not the end of your story, but the end of a sentence, a pause before the next breath, the next world, the next form? Maybe this is why so many people report seeing loved ones as they die, why they speak of light, of warmth, of guidance, not as hallucinations, but as transitions, as arrivals. Maybe what we call spirits, what we call ghosts, are not trapped echoes, but travelers between layers. Maybe the dead are not gone. They have simply changed address. And what about those you miss, the ones who've left and left you aching? What if they are not unreachable, but simply tuned to a frequency you can no longer hear? What if every now and then, when you feel them, when their name echoes in your mind out of nowhere, when their memory warms you without cause, that is their way of waving across dimensions, saying, I am still here, I never left, I just went ahead. So, sleep now, not in fear of the end, but in awe of what may come next. Let go of the need to know, and rest in the possibility that death is not something to escape or dread, but something to eventually understand. That beyond this life, there is more. That beyond this form, there is continuity. That beyond this breath, there is something waiting, something watching, something loving. You are not a body. You are not a brain. You are not a collection of memories. You are awareness itself, infinite, curious, ever becoming. And when the time comes to step through that final door, you will not be ending. You will be continuing. Until then, may your dreams carry you to the edge of that mystery, and gently, beautifully, let you return.